Do you enjoy theater? If so, we've got the place to add to your bucket list, the hometown of William Shakespeare.
You're listening to Travel FOMO, a podcast for people self-diagnosed with wanderlust.
Welcome back to Travel FOMO. We are sharing our stories from our current gap year, where we went all over the United Kingdom, Europe, Canada, and the US. And in this episode, we're continuing our journey through England. We spent a few days in one of our favorite places, Stratford-Upon-Avon. I'm Jamin and Hilarie. I'm here with my wife and theater fanatic, really the reason that I know more about theater other than what Bugs Bunny taught me, Hilarie.
That is definitely me. I am so into theater, and especially if for people who've known me a long time, that is like so unsurprising. I actually grew up loving theater. My family did theater, so like, oh my gosh, it's my jam. I did stage productions, growing up in like high school and stuff like that, and then started out as a musical theater major. So yeah, I think that probably says enough. But I love the stage. I love what people can do on the stage. I love that like the stage is different than a movie. A movie, every time you watch it, it's the same thing over and over again, but on stage things are always different. And so I just think there's some pretty great things that come with theater, and we'll be talking about that a lot today.
I will say there's a lot to enjoy about theater, and I feel like a lot of guys don't really discover theater until some lady in their life makes them go. So I appreciate that
You're welcome.
Took me to the theater and took me to do some good stuff so that I could learn to enjoy it.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's it's dear to my heart. So I'm always like grateful every time you sit down with me in a theater.
Before we dive into the episode, we did want to acknowledge that we're reliving our time in England, and the next time we go back to England will be decidedly different than this time because the Queen has just passed.
Yeah.
And she is such an important part of that country and the culture there, and so many places that you go have her picture up. She's on all the money, and her life and her service is just seen everywhere throughout that country. And so I think us getting to be there sort of right at the end of her reign was really cool. Like they were just about to celebrate her Platinum Jubilee, where, they're celebrating her reigning for 70 years, which is a crazy thought. We got to be there, and it's surreal to think that when we go back, it will be different. Because
so different.
It won't be God Save the Queen anymore, and it, just so many things that center around that. It will now be a king. And so who knows the next time that a queen will sit on the throne.
It's a very monumental time and very sobering as we go through all of these podcast episodes, and it's all about England right now. I can't believe that we're talking about England, and England is the most televised thing right now, and they're going through such a huge change, and that we are getting to think and ponder about England at such a time as this. She was so respected as she was living, not just after she died.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that's hard.
And you could tell that when you're in England, you could tell how much people respect the Queen. People are not making jokes. There is no making fun of the Queen. Like, she is loved. She is beloved. And I think that's just really powerful. And then you get to see that now in how they're honoring her in her death, but you could always see it. And that's just really cool. In England, you are on our hearts right now. So we
loved England and loved being there. And speaking of England and those that have had a huge lasting impact on England, Shakespeare would be one of those.
That's right.
I think everyone has heard of Shakespeare and kind of knows who Shakespeare was, but getting to be in Stratford-Upon-Avon, a town that's all about him, and really getting to like learn more about him. And I feel like I appreciate him so much more after our trip there. It was really cool.
Stratford-Upon-Avon does such a good job of honoring Shakespeare and making him relevant in a really modern way. And so I just think that is so fun because it plays into so much of our adventures there. And
Yes.
so, we've got so much to tell people about this particular place and all the things that we did while we were here, not just in this city, but we kind of traveled outside the city too. So, really like the way this all started out is we were kind of making our way, from Bath, England. We actually stopped in Oxford and we were on our way here, Stratford-Upon-Avon, which can we just talk about how these English cities have the most unique names? Like Stratford-Upon-Avon is 3 different words, and that is the name. So it just sounds like a mouthful. And so sometimes I have to like stop and like say it. But all these little hyphenated cities and stuff. Doesn't that mean like river?
Yes.
Or Avon is the name of the river.
It's the name of the river that the city is built upon.
Right. Yeah. So I just think that's really interesting, and why all of these names are so long in some of these like places that we end up going to in England. And just kind of interesting because it's just kind of a more descriptive way of identifying the city.
Yeah. And I feel like there's so many around there too. There's like the Slaughters and Burton on the Water and all kinds of crazy names like that you don't really expect, and are just it makes it seem so foreign and kind of fairy tale whimsical a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, this was the first of several names you guys will hear like that. But we got an Airbnb in this place too, and in this city as well. And just like we did in Bath, except here it was way better. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
We actually had like a real residence. Right.
It was much more like an actual apartment with like a legit kitchen and like a living room.
Well, and even just like a first floor and a second floor. And it definitely felt like we could kind of create a home, and we were there for several days. And so one of the first things that we did actually was go to the grocery store, which, you guys have heard us say like, okay, we've been like trying to eat at home and save money while, eat quote at home. Every home was like so different. We were only there for a couple days, but we would always try to like eat in our Airbnb to save money. And I just really had a great time going to the grocery store with you, which sounds so silly, but it was like such a fun experience.
Yeah.
And were you go ahead.
No, I agree. I think it really kind of started, I feel like we went to the grocery store in Bath, and that was good, but it was still kind of like getting to know everything. I feel like Stratford-Upon-Avon started us going to the grocery store and it being sort of an experience.
Yes.
Where it
totally.
was like, okay, we're going to experience what a grocery store is like in this other place.
Yeah. It is the most telling thing about wherever you are is when you walk into the grocery store, and even in America, grocery stores are completely different everywhere you go, depending on what part of the country you're in. It was so entertaining. And so I always looked forward to us arriving and then going to the grocery store. And in this instance, we actually went to like a legit grocery store. It was really big. It was really close to the train station and our Airbnb. And Stratford-Upon-Avon is such a walkable city. And so we really just got to kind of show up. And I remember actually the people being really friendly in the store, which is so funny. But, we walked through the store. We actually took a lot of time to find the things that we wanted. We bought some, I specifically wanted some more of those digestive cookies. If you guys heard the last episode, I kind of got hooked on those digestive cookies, like the little chocolate biscuits that they have in... literally it would be like buying a Keebler cookie. And I just loved those. So
You
I
were
was
all over those.
I was hooked at that point. So I got me some of those. You were hooked on Pringles.
Yeah, I
Don't lie.
I was, but I think I got drawn in every time by finding a new weird flavor that I'd never seen before.
Yeah, it was so funny.
And I think prawn Pringles were the ones that we found here that I was like, prawn? What?
No, prawn Pringles were in Edinburgh because Edinburgh, Scotland is up by the ocean. And so it was much more fishy.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're
so
right.
I don't remember what was here, but
No, I can't place it
there's
either.
a bunch of.
There were a bunch of them over the course of our time.
Well, and
in
at
Europe,
first
but-
you were buying them because Pringles were familiar, right?
Mhm,
Because
yeah.
if you bought other chips, you didn't know exactly what you're getting. And at least if you got Pringles, you would know, you would be satisfied with them.
Right.
So, and the other thing about Pringles, this is so funny. We're going to talk about food for a few minutes, guys. Pringles, I really, I admire them for being everywhere. I feel like there hasn't been a country that they weren't in.
Nope, they were everywhere.
Yeah, they're everywhere, which is really convenient, but also they're great to travel with because they don't come in a bag where they can get all smushed. They come in a little cylinder can. And
Yeah.
so I was always walking around with this Jamin's bag of box, what do you even call it?
Canister, I guess.
Can of Pringles? Yeah, your can of Pringles. Granted, like our can of Pringles, but I would always have it in my bag, and we would pack a sandwich and stuff like that for the day, but you'd always hear me coming because you could hear these Pringles like rattling around inside my bag while I walked.
Just jingling around. It was like,
so funny.
it was almost like an old Western where you hear like a cowboy walking, you hear a spurs jingle, only it was you, like a can of Pringles everywhere you went.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. What else we got? We got hot cross buns, which I'd always heard about and hadn't tried, and I really wanted to try them.
Well, and we
And
got
they were
them.
fine.
We got them because we were going to make sandwiches with them.
Oh yeah, and then they had like
And then they
raisins.
ended
kind
up
of a
being like sweet.
sweetness. And we're like,
raisins.
oh, we just didn't know what they tasted like. But I mean, we really got legit groceries. We ate at home almost the entire time we were there.
I think we only had one meal out while we were there.
Yeah, I think so. So we were making we had cereal and milk for breakfast, pasta, salmon cakes. We'd always buy a bottle of wine.
Well, I got to.
And yeah, it was but it was really fun, and it's such an experience, and I would really recommend always go into a grocery store if you're in a foreign country because it's just fun.
It is fun. And I feel like Stratford-Upon-Avon was a small enough city that with the combination of our Airbnb being more like an actual apartment that we would pick for ourselves and go into the grocery store, it felt like we lived there for those few days more than other places. Other places are feel more like I'm not from here. I'm this is all strange to me. But Stratford-Upon-Avon really felt like we got a little taste of living there.
Oh, that's neat. I like that. That's cool. I loved how walkable that city was too.
Oh yeah, it was
Which,
great.
That's one of the things that we did. We went for we walked everywhere, but we specifically went on a run.
Yeah, we ran there, and they have canals that run along the river, and these canals used to be used for basically moving cargo around. And so they have these long skinny boats, and horses would actually pull the boats up and down the river. So there'd be a rope attached to a horse walking along the bank of the river, pulling these boats. And now that old horse path has been converted into a running path. So we were able to go run it, which was really cool and a lot of fun.
Yeah, it really I think we were just we were super on a high. We were on a high being in England, and it was so fun to get to run and then just see people seeing people walk to work while we were running and stuff like that. It was fun.
Yeah, that was really cool. And we went to Warwick Castle
that same day. That was a busy day because we ran and then we walked a lot.
Yeah, we put in a lot of miles that day. But Warwick Castle was like a really quick train ride. I literally think the train ride was like 8 minutes. And
was it really?
yeah,
For
it was
some reason,
like,
I thought we switched trains and stuff like that.
no, not for that one.
Oh, that's nice.
It was like right there, really close. And the way that we went into the castle was really cool. And I think there's 2 entrances, and one has like a big parking lot for like buses and things like that. And then another one is kind of through the city. And I think we accidentally took the one that's more through the city, but I was so glad that we did, because it's this huge tunnel of like, I don't know, there's rock on either side, but it's all kind of grown over with moss, and there's these huge trees, and it looks a million years old and super cool. And you just imagine all the people that have gone up and down this long entrance over the years, and it's really an incredible thing.
It was really setting the mood for sure. And I'd been to Warwick Castle before with the President's Leadership Council at the University of Central Oklahoma, and we'd all been. And I remember us, I'll say this. I don't remember walking down that long, exotic entrance because we came in on a bus. I'm sure we just came from that parking lot. And when you and I came down that long driveway and like walking through all of this vegetation and down this like not eerie path, but it was very, not even whimsical. It was just very like, it felt like you were going back in time and you had a long time to think about it, like where you're about to go and get to this front gate and stuff. God, it's just the best way to enter. It was really cool. It really set the mood.
It was really cool. And that day was a little overcast, and I think rained on us just a little bit a few times, but that kind of added to like the lure of this like English castle, and you're kind of drinking it all in. And because it's so well preserved and because it all there, like it really does feel like walking back in time. And just as a reminder to everyone, like we have YouTube vlogs now that go along with our podcast, and so we did a lot of filming at the castle, so there's a lot there that you can see. So go watch the YouTube channel, because you'll get to see this long tunnel and all of the castle and all of its majesty, and just like the coolness of this castle really comes across a lot better when you can actually see it. So go check that out. You'll want to do that for sure. But it was incredible to see. I mean, one of the highlights of the trip for me, and one of the things that I've been looking forward to the most, was seeing this castle. And it was really cool to get to go there. And when we first got in, they were like, oh, like the bird show is about to start.
They did. They kept telling us, don't miss the bird show. The bird show is going to be starting in a few minutes.
We go down to watch the bird show, and there's like some bench seating, and then other people are kind of sitting on the ground, and all the bench seating was full. So we just sat on the ground, and I wasn't expecting much out of a bird show. I kind of figured somebody would walk out with like a bird on their arm and be like, this is Joey the parrot, and like kind of one of those things. And this was not what that was. So Warwick Castle is not owned by the crown, so it's a little different than other castles that you might see. So we've gone in the past, we went to the Tower of London and Lancaster Castle. On this particular trip, we went to Dover Castle, and they're all owned by the crown, so it's much more museum. And Warwick Castle is privately owned, so it's much more like a theme park almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which has good things and bad things. Like they do a lot more to make it more entertaining, but it is a lot more like skewed towards kids. Mm-hmm. And it does tend to drive the price of like every little thing inside up. And so they have, archers that you can shoot a bow, and they, just a ton of stuff, like the dungeon. You can go down in the dungeon, and everything costs a little bit extra. So just beware of that before you go. But it's much more theme park, and the bird show definitely held that lure because they had all kinds of birds of prey. So we're talking falcons and bald eagles and vultures, and they would like release them from these cages and they would fly in between handlers, and the handlers were kind of stationed all around the crowd, and these birds would swoop down, and we're talking inches above your head that they would fly by, which I don't know how it's safe. I mean, there are signs up that say like, hey, once the show starts, don't stand up.
Yeah,
But
don't reach out and touch the birds.
Yeah,
because
and-
you can.
Yeah, and they're right there. So you're talking about like a bald eagle like flying right over your head,
Yeah.
which is I didn't even know that kind of thing existed really. So that was kind of wild and crazy.
Yeah, there's some pretty big birds for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a little it wasn't the Shakespeare acting that we'll talk about later.
No, that's yeah. It was
That
a
wasn't
little
the
less
point.
of what
It was a bird show.
what you were looking for. But then you also get to tour the castle itself. And we found out in the midst of like touring the castle, which it's a massive castle and has all of this stuff in it. But in the 1800s, there was a fire there, and the servants like went and saved the kids because like the Earl of Warwick and his wife were gone. But the servants like got the kids out, and then the servants were like frantically going back inside the castle to save the artwork and artifacts and things like that, which is, you know, you think about saving something from a fire and like risking yourself, and you're like, oh, that's just stuff. But all this stuff had such historic significance, and because of those servants being willing to like run back in and save it, like you can see a lot of it now, which I thought was really cool that all that stuff was saved, and now like every day people get to go and see it because of their willingness to be brave in those moments, which is cool.
Yeah, I think that was my favorite story from being at Warwick Castle was how the servants ran in to save the kids.
Right.
But then Jamin also is really appreciative that they saved the art. But I mean, it's kind of a crazy story.
But now like it's set up for you to tour, and you get to go through all these rooms, and
But
so
it's not like a tour, right? Like it's
right, there's
really
no
just
one,
like self-guided.
Yeah,
walk.
there's not someone taking you through and telling you like here's this and that, but you can like you get to walk through, and there's little plaques that explain things a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's really cool that they have it set up in sort of in different eras. So they have the Great Hall where they have a bunch of swords and armor and things like that set up, and then they have other rooms set up the way they were in other times, even with realistic looking mannequins and stuff like that to kind of show you a scene of what the room was used for and how it would have looked back in the day. And you really do step back in time as you go through the castle, as you see it all kind of unfold in front of you. And I mean, for me, it has pretty much everything you want out of a castle. Like you get to see this huge castle that's still intact. You get to tour the grounds. They have a beautiful garden out back with like peacocks that were roaming around. There were like these little kids trying to step on the peacock's feathers. And so we were walking through the garden.
Oh my
and
gosh,
like,
that's right.
you know, they have like just a ton of land around with a river that runs by, and it's everything you want out of an old English castle. You really do feel like you've walked into something hundreds of years old.
Well, it's so comprehensive, and I think
Mhm.
sometimes you can go to castles that are really old and they have different pieces of it that are neat and interesting, but it's not as holistic. It's not like a whole castle with all of its original artwork and original like knights, you know, what do you call it? Like the gear that the knights
The
wear.
armor. And
Yeah,
stuff
the
like
armor
that.
and stuff like that. Like it was pretty crazy. One of my favorite things was seeing this huge pot that looked a little bit like a witch's pot, a witch's brew, not gonna lie, but it was so big. You could fit probably 3 people in it.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what they would use for parties. And
Right. It was like a punch bowl.
I liked that a lot.
Well,
I was like,
I think,
good.
didn't we read that they had a party at one point and they filled that thing up 3 different times with rum?
Oh, yeah. That's a good party right
Yeah,
there.
that's a rager right there.
It's a rager.
Is there something you know about that revolutionizes the way you travel? Can it solve problems and help people around the roadblocks on their adventures? Is it just plain cool? If you have a product like that, we would love to tell people about it. Get in contact with us, and maybe next time we'll be talking about your product right now.
Yeah, so we went to the Royal Shakespeare Company Theatre. It is so legit.
Yeah.
It's so good. And like basically it feels like such an experience too. We got dressed up that night, and I just remember thinking like it kind of felt like a date night. Like I was like, "Oh, this is fun. We're getting like
Going out on the town."
And of course, like I said, everything's super walkable, so we just are walking to this theater, and lo and behold, we were not walking to the correct location. Because we were using Apple Maps, and I quickly learned that Apple Maps is not the European preference for accuracy. So, and perhaps maybe not in America either. We're learning, but the location was different than, and I even remember looking like at the emails and everything, trying to figure out like, why don't they just have like an address?
Right.
Or like, and I could not find anything like that. It was the weirdest thing, but I think it's one of those things where they're like, kind of like saying like, well, you don't ask where the castle is, like you just know where the castle is.
Right.
So it was kind of one of those things where like, well, nobody ever asks us where it's at because it's like the big main attraction or whatever. Yeah, and here we are, foreigners that really need to actually know like the address, and since the map was wrong on our phone, we kept trying to find it. We like walked around this little block trying to figure it out, and we realized we were at the old location.
Yes.
So then we tried to find the new location, and I think I just had to dig and dig and dig on their website until I found it. But time is ticking, and when you're on your feet walking, you don't have a lot of time to get to your next location. So fortunately, it wasn't a lot further away, and we were able to make it in time, but barely.
We got there just in time.
That was crazy. We literally showed up, and as we walked through the door, we could hear them saying like, kind of like dimming the lights, for the last time, saying like the show will start in 2 minutes. Literally 2 minutes. That was crazy. And these were like kind of expensive tickets, so it was like you want to be there for it,
right?
And oh man, I will say they were fabulous, because as soon as we got all seated and everything, this female attendant came up to us, and she like walked over and was whispering to us and was like, hey, like there are these empty seats at the front, like of the balcony. Do you guys want to move up so you can have a really good seat on the edge of the balcony? And we're like, yeah, thank you. That's amazing. So we ended up having much better seats than we originally purchased.
Yeah, I think to save money, we had selected like obstructed view janitor's closet tickets. and I think she felt bad for us and pointed out some open seats. So that was really great, because we did get awesome seats in the balcony for, just because she was nice to us.
Because she's really nice to us. That was really awesome. And we were there to see, I don't even know if we've mentioned this yet, we were there to see War of the Roses, which I've never seen before. That was my first time.
Yeah, I had not either.
It was really good. And if you think you don't know what's going on, you figure it out really fast, because these actors are amazing, and they could be speaking a completely different language and you would know what's happening on stage.
Right.
They were so good. And but they weren't. They were just speaking Shakespeare,
Yes.
Shakespearean language. But basically, the storyline is about the battle between the Duke of York and King Henry VI. And it's a real history.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes it really fun because you're actually learning about the place that you're in,
Right.
which is just, I mean, the coolest way to do it. But I will say I was so surprised at how modern the style was and how they pulled that off in such a unique way. They had just a bunch of interesting techniques that they used that I haven't seen, and I just thought it was just really cool. One of the things is that they had these chain link curtains, basically.
Right.
So if you imagine a armor that a man would put on to go fight in a war back in the medieval times, it's made of all this chain.
Right, like chainmail. Yeah.
That chainmail. Okay. So they would use that chainmail, or so we think, and so it seemed. They were using, but it was definitely chains.
Mm-hmm.
And they were using it to create these curtains. These curtains were several stories high.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. They were, I can't even imagine how much it must have weighed because it kind of created a sheer curtain that then they used to project images onto. So you've got this wall of chain in front of you, and then they're projecting images. These images are actually being recorded live because they're using cameras to capture footage in the moment from on stage. So most of the time when you go to the theater, you see somebody on stage, and if you happen to be sitting right in front of them, you've got a really good view of what's happening on their face. But other times, if you're like us, you don't have front row seats and you don't really get to see all of the expression.
Right.
But in this instance, they had cameramen like literally on stage with them, getting up in their face and then projecting that image, that video onto the wall or onto this, chain wall. It was the coolest thing because you're seeing people cry, you're seeing people's face as they die, and it's all happening really like huge in front of you. It was all in black and white. The video piece of it. Yeah. And it was crazy to see cameramen running around being a part of a Shakespeare play.
It really was. And I mean, the whole projecting, and like you're saying, I've never experienced that in theater before, where you can see someone's face and their emotion and so much expression so up close, but you're still seeing them on stage, which was amazing to me. And them just doing Shakespeare, I feel like every other Shakespeare production I've ever seen, people were just like, isn't this impressive that I memorized these Shakespeare lines and I can like say them back? But I feel like this was really acted out. Yeah. And like you saw all of the emotion and all of the feeling and the aggression or the fear or all of that stuff really punched through, despite the fact that they were saying everything in the original Shakespearean language.
Script, yeah.
They really, really acted well too in it and made that speech pattern or whatever you want to call it very believable. You're like, this is a real conversation that people are having, and even though the language is very flowery for my ear, it's not to them. It's just a conversation to them. And I'd never seen it done that well before. It was really good. Yeah,
that was awesome. They definitely bring the script to life. So if you're sitting in English class reading Shakespeare, this was a little different because it actually it made so much sense. You knew exactly what was going on, and yeah, it's because of how good they were at it. I was surprised there were 2 intermissions, and that threw me off. I was like, wait, what's happening?
Yeah.
And I didn't actually know the history, so I didn't know the story. So I'm like, I don't know if it's over or not.
Well.
Yeah. But one of I don't know if I should call this a highlight, but something that I didn't know was going to happen was that we were going to get a little surprise full frontal on stage. And that this guy, I mean, if you know the history, it's maybe not as surprising if you know the story. But like, I guess it was the king, right?
Yeah,
the king's running
VI.
around in distress, and he's just lets it all hang. And if you were sitting on the front row, like I don't know how you would feel about that.
Yeah, that's when you're definitely glad to be in the balcony at that point, because you're like, oh,
did
whoa.
that just happen?
Like,
It's a Janet Jackson moment.
like a locker room going on up there.
That's crazy. Yeah, so we'll just have to let our listeners decide whether or not those are good seats, because I'm not sure.
That's a personal preference.
That's a personal preference.
It's like, how much do you want to see when you go to the theater? You talk about like a day packed full of awesome stuff was that day.
Mm-hmm.
And the next day we went and hiked the Cotswolds, which was
so
another
lovely.
incredible thing. Like, definitely highlight of the trip for me. And I want to tell you all about it, but I'm not going to today. The Cotswolds was so cool and so epic that it's getting an episode all of its own. So make sure that you're subscribed wherever you listen to podcasts, and as well to our YouTube channel, because we're going to do all the Cotswolds. So this little chunk of our time there is going to be captured all on its own
next week. Nice.
So like that'll be really cool. You want to stay for that. But we were not done with Stratford-Upon-Avon even after an awesome day in the Cotswolds.
That's right, because then we went on a Shakespeare tour, and it's kind of like our own Shakespeare tour.
Yeah,
we just kind of whip this thing. We just whip this thing up. It's easy to do though, because there are just so many notable places that honor Shakespeare within Stratford-Upon-Avon, and so we just decided we're gonna kind of like take people there. And so we did, and you should really go to see the video for this too, because you can, if you go to YouTube and watch the video, you'll see us kind of take you to these places. But we went to Shakespeare's home, as in his like first home, his birthplace.
Yeah.
And it is like crazy that these homes are still standing. I got a little distracted and made my way through a farmer's market on our way to our next location. And our next location was Anne Hathaway's house.
Not the actress.
Jamin loves to say that.
Well, it's important to point out. Like the Anne Hathaway that's like in Get Smart and Les Miserables, like it's not her that was married to William Shakespeare.
It is not.
She's not hundreds of years old. Mm-hmm. She's not some kind of witch that has been able to stay young for this whole time.
Yeah.
Just a different Anne Hathaway.
It's a different Anne Hathaway. But you get to see her home too, which is fun because it's a part of the story, because it's where she lived when he was dating her. And so you can actually kind of do the walk, and more or less we walked from his house to hers, and that's the path that he probably would have been taking to go see her and take her on a date.
Do you think he was like writing some kind of like flowery poetry? Do you think he did that like at his house and then like took it to her, or do you think he like came with it, like he invented that on the way from his house to her house?
Oh, I think that he was always in his head about his like writing and everything. So I'm sure he was like obsessing about it all the time, and then like, practicing it on the way to her house. But I think he had already figured things out.
You think he like showed up and was like, "Oh, I wrote this for you," whatever?
No.
You think she stood on a balcony and he like stood below and he read like, it's like, "I'm going to read this to you"?
I don't know.
And her dad was like, "Bill, shut up. Just take her to get a Coke and then come back."
I'm very curious as to how he wooed her, but I bet it was decently done.
Yeah, I think there's probably a poem or two that got in the mix.
Yeah, there's probably a poem or two. but there's probably like a lot of like dramatic emphasis as well. He's probably like willing to like, he probably just confessed all the things he's willing to do for her, and, you know, was probably really dramatic about that. And she was like, okay, you don't have to like slit your wrist for me. Like, it's fine. I'll be with you.
You don't think that like maybe that was his work and he was like, no, that's work. I'm dramatic at work. At home, no drama. Zero drama, Bill.
Do you know
like
anybody
William
who's
Shakespeare,
ever been in the theater?
William Shakespeare, super drama at work, comes home, and it's like, now I'm just Bill. I just like to chill.
That's not how theater people are.
I think maybe it was.
That's how you are. That's how Jamin is. He's like very like when work is over, he's like done. No work. Don't want to talk about work, nothing like that, which I think is healthy. So I think that's good. But that's not how really dramatic people are. And I think William Shakespeare lived and breathed his stuff. I think he would stay up all night if he wanted to. He didn't have like, I don't think he had working hours. I think if something hit him, he was like passionately running towards it.
It's like drama all the time.
Yes.
He's like Andy from The Office.
And I have this feeling, but I don't know this, but I know theater people, and I have this feeling he had a big range of emotions and he exercised them all every day. Pretty sure.
That's probably.
Pretty sure.
That's probably more true.
Where were we? We were on a tour.
Right,
a Shakespeare
Anne
tour.
Hathaway's house.
Yes, we're at
Bill's,
Anne Hathaway's
reading
house.
Poetry to her.
We decided to. We did not tour any of these places though. Actually, we just toured the city.
We didn't pay to go inside.
We didn't pay to go inside any of these. We were really cheap. Looking back at some of this, but we went and had lunch by the river, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but it was like hopping. It was like the place to be.
It was packed, yeah.
Oh my gosh, like it was crazy. It was very cool. One of the things I'll never forget though is we're sitting there, and I went and got out the GoPro and I'm sitting it down just because I think like this is kind of a fun moment to capture. Let's capture this. And I kid you not, a swan just swims up, and I'm just thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have this beautiful shot of the swan like swimming right up to the camera, and it takes a dive at the camera and I'm like, oh my goodness, this swan, which we all know swans can be a little aggressive, but my gosh, it was going to eat the camera, and I snagged it just in time. Like, it was crazy.
Yeah,
it's on video.
It did not want its video. It did not want its image out there.
It did not.
To
it
be
was
distributed.
Like, you do
it's
not
like, no,
Instagram that.
Taking that down.
Let's see, what else did we do? We went to Shakespeare's new home, which is what they call it. It's, basically where he lived later in his life.
Yes.
And then we went to Shakespeare's burial place, which is inside a church.
Yep.
It happened to be Good Friday.
Yes.
So there was a lot going on there. So we didn't like film as much, and kind of hang out as much, but it was kind of neat too. It was another instance in which we walked through a church, a cathedral, and there was like an interactive activity kind of going on. And so you kind of got to walk through all these stations where they had these interactive things that you would do and things you would write on, and kind of like go through and kind of remind you of Good Friday and Easter and everything. And that was all just like, we didn't even know we were going to get that. We were just coming in to see Shakespeare's burial place. Let's see. I keep talking about us like eating at home all the time, but that night we actually did go out to eat.
Yes, that was our one time to eat out, and we ate at the Old Thatch Pub, or the Old Thatch Tavern, rather. It was the Old Thatch Tavern, and it's a pub that is there in Stratford-Upon-Avon. It's like 400 years old.
Holy moly.
Which was really cool. And why we picked it has like a thatch roof. And so that like quintessential Englishness that you want to experience. And so we went there for that. It had been recommended on a few websites and things like that, like lists of places to go. So we picked it, and then as we were preparing to go, you sniffed out the fact that it might be haunted.
Oh, yeah.
So then you're really, really excited to go because it could be haunted. Apparently, on Christmas Day in 1795, someone was murdered there.
A Christmas Day murder.
Yeah, Christmas Day murder. And now Joseph Penfield continues to haunt the place, or so the legend goes. And so we asked the bartender about old Joey, and he said that he hadn't actually seen anything himself, but that the place did get really creepy. Several of his coworkers had seen some stuff, and they all tried to never work alone, which is a bit unsettling.
Right? Can you imagine, like, hey, will you lock up? I'd be like, no.
Mm-mm.
I'll lock up with you. But that's crazy.
And then, like, the food was actually really good there. We had some cottage pies, and we tried something outside the box. We had whitebait.
Oh, yeah, that was cool. That was
which,
good.
is kind of, it's basically whole fish fried, and kind of like started us down the avenue of like, we're going to try some weird stuff anywhere we come across it. And we ended up trying a lot of kind of crazy things on this trip. But that, I feel like this was our first venture into like, I don't know if I'm really into that, but let's try it.
Yeah, let's try it.
So that's kind of fun. It was actually really good. Like, you would kind of squeeze some lemon over it, and it's just kind of like fried fish.
It was really good. Yeah.
So like
it was my favorite thing we had that night. Yeah.
But it was a really cool place. Service was great.
You know what I keep remembering about it, and I think about it especially now that it's haunted, is that it had really low ceilings. If I remember correctly, you had to duck to like get in the door or to get under
there were
the
several
beams.
There were several beams that I had to kind of duck down to go under, and I'm not a very tall person. So I don't know what tall people, I'm not sure what they were, just like hands and knees, I guess, but it was like, you could just tell it's super old, and people have just been coming here to share a meal and have a pint for so long.
Yeah.
And then after we finished dinner, we walked around the streets a little bit more, and we actually went into the White Swan.
The White Swan.
Because, it's a swan thing. And so we were going to go in. They had a lot of great ciders on draft there, and we just sat at the bar and had a pint or two, and really just kind of talked about what an awesome time that we had while we were there.
Overall, I was like so surprised at how charming Stratford-Upon-Avon was, and it was just easy. It was so easy to be there. It was easy to navigate. It was easy to be around, or to, like I said, how walkable it was. Like, it all just felt pretty effortless. This is where we started to really see personalities in different cities. And like, we literally talked about this. We talked about how in Bath, England, you could kind of feel the luxury of it all. It kind of felt like the place that you go for a place to pamper yourself, almost in a way. And that has to do with the spas and stuff like that are there. But then Stratford-Upon-Avon, you've kind of got more of an artsy vibe because you've got the theater stuff. We went to Oxford. Oxford is so scholastic and whimsical.
Yeah, because of all the authors, and you feel it's. You do feel that there.
Yeah. And that's our last episode. If you hadn't heard that one, you might go back and listen to that. But and then here soon we'll be going to York.
Yes.
In another episode or two. And that is kind of has a it's got a party scene, but then it's also got this air of conflict because so much, you kind of pointed that out, that like there's so much conflict happened there.
Right. There's so much in that city, from like Vikings coming over at one point, taking it over, to it being sort of the center of England during a lot of conflict with Scotland, to like Guy Fawkes and the Gunpowder Rebellion, like basically coming out of there, and just so much angst and conflict, and you feel it in that city. And it is amazing, the different feel that each city has, even though they're so close geographically. And I mean, I guess sort of ignorance of being in America, you're like, oh yeah, you go over to England and like it's a small city outside of London, so they're all going to kind of be the same, but they're so different and so unique and cool just in their own way.
Next episode, you guys are going to want to tune in because the Cotswolds is so unique in itself.
It was such a cool day.
It's a really cool day. And it was part of us being here in Stratford-Upon-Avon.
Mm-hmm.
But like Jamin said, it really just deserves its own episode. So Jamin, real quick, before we wrap it up, go ahead and tell them what the Cotswolds is, because not everybody really understands what that is. So then they kind of have a little taste of what they're about to hear next week.
Right. So the Cotswolds is basically like a region of England. And so it's really like a beautiful, like rolling hills, and was well known for the wool industry for a long time. And so these little cities and villages throughout the Cotswolds were really wealthy because of wool and because of the sheep and all of that industry. And when that kind of died out, these cities sort of like hit pause. And I feel like there's so much of Europe that was destroyed by World War II, but all of these places were small enough to not be targets. And so they're just so well preserved, and it really is like walking back in time. And there are little villages that are really close together, and you can actually hike. So we saw a couple by bus, and then we hiked through several others, and it was just amazing. If anybody's going to England, I would say go see the Cotswolds and those little English villages. It's so charming and so cool, and we can't wait to tell you all about it.
Yeah, and definitely hike them, because walking through everybody's private property is just kind of blows your mind that that's allowed in England.
Mm-hmm.
And it's feels very special. It's very neat. So yeah,
it's really cool.
So that's coming up next week. You guys are gonna want to tune in. You guys, if you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, obviously we want you to. We also want you to go out and rate and review us. It really just helps other people know what they can expect from the podcast, and it elevates us so that we can kind of appear in people's feeds a little bit better. So that would be super helpful to make that happen.
That would be very much appreciated if you do that for us.
And then also, you guys should check out social media. It's just an easy way to keep up with us. You actually can see where we are currently, exactly where we've been traveling right now. And then we'll also just make sure and send out little reminders whenever the newest episode drops. So we are on Facebook and Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Also, subscribing on YouTube, there's some value to that right now, because you will actually get to see the places that we're going, and so it's such an enhancement to what you hear on the podcast. It's like we got to live it, but now we get to really like talk about it and relive it. So really we're winning in this scenario. I hope you guys are too.
Yeah, I hope everyone's enjoying it.
Exactly. You guys just enjoy your week. If you are planning a vacation, drop us a line and tell us about it. Like, tag us on social media or something and tell us about like what you've got in store, because we love seeing everyone travel and come back from COVID. It's just been amazing. So
we want to steal your ideas.
Exactly. And we love that for you, because life is short.
Wander well.